The next part of this tutorial is the permanent installation. There are some important configuration settings you have to make, and we will install the client and server as background service. First, about the configuration settings. One important setting might be that you use the memory cache database. This requires some SSD on the RR server. By default, the server keeps the job list in memory and writes a backup every 30 minutes. So in case that your machine is turned off by a power failure or something like that, the jobs submitted within the last 30 minutes might be lost. If you enable this option, then the server saves all jobs when it receives new jobs. They are directly saved to the drive. You have the option to tell Allrender how many jobs you want to have in the list. It will delete finished jobs if you reach this limit. You can increase this up to perhaps 50,000. You can tell Allrender after how many days it should delete jobs, and jobs are automatically exported in a history database, and this database is deleted after 800 days. The next important setting is how does Allrender get the company project you're currently working on. For this, it uses either the scene or image path. I will use the scene path. And as you can see, as most companies, they use a folder name, and this folder name is the company project. So I'm browsing to my scene file in this company project. Just any file, so Allrender gets your path. And then I can tell Allrender, okay, it's the third path, and the third path is the name Cube Commercial. The next important setting is for Windows. On Windows, you need you might use mapped drives, and in this case, you have to tell Allrender, okay, this UNC path has to be mapped to drive M, because once the client is running as a background service, it will not be able to access any drives the logged in user can access. Another important setting, if you're mixing different operating systems like Windows and Linux, you have to tell Allrender, okay, the UNC path on Windows is this path on Linux, and this drive letter is this drive on Linux. That's it. Okay, now the service installation. The background service has a few advantages. At first, if you're running a server like this and someone clicks here or closes the server or logs off, then the server just shuts down and you're not able to use Allrender anymore. With the background service, Allrender will boot up if the machine starts, so you don't need to log in. It runs as a background service, so the user logged in may or may not have access to the same file share as Allrender. If you're using Allrender in a larger company, then some users might be restricted and are only allowed to work in smaller projects, while Allrender still needs to access the larger projects to render them. Third advantage is that the service verifies that the application is still running, and in case of the server, it verifies that each task of the server is still running, like checking for frame, managing clients, communicating with control, and if one of these tasks is not executed because of an issue, the server is restarted by the service. To install the service, you have to use the workstation installer. Okay, on my machine, I will install the client as a service. I need to enter some username with password. This user is required for the client that it can access your file server and all the data on your file server. In case the user is not in the administrator group, I will add it to the administrators because I want to be able to install applications via Wallvender, and only administrators can install applications. The process lister is an application like the task manager. It is required for Wallvender to check the processes and how much CPU they are using. I will install it as a service. If you don't add this user to the administrators group, it must be installed as a service. Then Wallvender disables Windows error reports. This is very, very important because if your render application crashes, then Windows might show some crash report. And you have to click on send or abort. And until you click on send or abort, this machine is blocked. If you're using the Windows firewall, it will install firewall rules as well. Okay, installation done. So there will be a new icon which you have to drag and drop to the task tray. It's not the client anymore, it's the client watch. Because a service does not have any user interface, you require some user interface to be able to control the client. It takes some time until the service is started, and then it will connect to the client. Yeah, app is starting. And you can control the client and view all the processor stats just like you did with the client. The service, as I said, it's a separate application that watches over the client. This application is installed on the machine. It is the only application that is installed on the machine. The service will get the client console from the Wallvender share, which means if you update Wallvender, all machines get the latest version. Automatically, it's not required to update to reinstall the client. Same for the server. I'm installing the server as a service, firewall rule, disable Windows error reports, install, and it will install a small helper as well. It will show you if the service is started and if the server was started. The service waits 30 seconds until starting the server because if the machine boots up, it has to initialize some network settings, Active Directory setting, anything, and that's why we wait 30 seconds. Okay, and that was the installation as a background service. And now I can just log off on the machine, and the server is still running in the background. Okay, that was the installation of Wallvender, and happy rendering.